Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. For the fourth time in 6 months, former President Trump pleading not guilty, this time in the case of challenging the election results in Georgia. Georgia's Republican governor splits with other Republicans and Trump on the issue. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more.
Another not guilty plea from former President Trump, this time in Fulton County, Georgia, where the district attorney is using a state-level crime that's normally used for mobs and gangs. She accuses Trump and 18 others of using illegal tactics and organizing an alternate slate of electors to cast ballots for former President Trump.
When you have that great freedom to challenge, you have to be able to, otherwise you're going to have very dishonest elections. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And everybody knows it. I've never had such support.
A Republican state senator called for a special session to investigate District Attorney Willis, but a Republican Governor Brian Kemp poured cold water on this.
Up to this point, I have not seen any evidence that DA Willis's actions or lack thereof warrant action by the Prosecuting Attorney Oversight Commission.
Kemp and the Secretary of State maintain that the state's election results showing that President Biden won are accurate and lawful. This case against Trump is much different than the past 3 indictments. He was ordered to go to jail for the first time to surrender, where his mugshot was taken, and he was asked to pay a $200,000 cash bail for the first time in all 3 of these indictments. It's also unique in how many people it targets. In addition to Trump, there are 18 co-defendants of his, adding up to a total of 41 counts, 13 of which are directed at the former president. Trump is the 4th defendant in this case to plead not guilty. His lawyers have also filed to sever his case from other co-defendants, some of which are seeking a speedy trial. Trump was set to appear in court for that arraignment next Wednesday, where the judge did rule that cameras will be allowed, which would mark the first time that the former president's court appearance would have been televised. But since Trump already entered that not guilty plea, he will not appear in court. He has waived his right to appear for that arraignment, marking the first time that the former president will not appear in court in any of these 4 indictments. Now, what we're looking for next is when that trial date will be set, which ultimately is set by the judge. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
One of the longest sentences handed down so far over the January 6th Capitol breach, former organizer of Proud Boys, Joseph Biggs, getting 17 years in prison. Federal prosecutors were seeking a 33-year sentence. On January 6, 2021, Biggs helped lead dozens of Proud Boys members and associates in marching to the Capitol. A jury in Washington, D.C. convicted him of several charges, including seditious conspiracy. The sentence for Biggs is the 2nd longest among all January 6 defendants, after the 18-year prison sentence for Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes. The national leader of Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, is set to be sentenced next Tuesday. President Biden plans to travel to Florida this weekend as the state begins its long recovery from Hurricane Idalia. But tensions are growing in Congress over additional funding for FEMA. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
And President Biden says today that he's going to travel to Florida on Saturday morning to see firsthand the damage caused by Hurricane Idalia. And he also vowed to provide long-term support for the Sunshine State as Florida begins its long recovery process. Here's what he said when visiting the FEMA headquarters in D.C. today.
And some of this is going to take months and years. I'm here to make clear that our nation has your back, and we are not going to, we're not going to walk away. We're not going to give up. We're not going to slow down.
And this morning, President Biden approved an overnight request from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to declare a major disaster in Florida. And that declaration will make available federal funds for Florida to help its local residents in several counties hit by the storm. But that's also as concerns are mounting after the FEMA administrator warned that the agency could soon run out of money without additional funding from Congress. So President Biden, as well as White House officials today, called on Congress to act. Watch.
Because that fund has been depleted. We have requested $12 billion because we know that every American expects FEMA to be there.
But Republicans are pushing back as the White House, in its funding request for Congress, linked up additional funding for FEMA with additional funding for Ukraine. So next week, when the Senate comes back, Senator Rick Scott from Florida says that he's going to introduce new legislation to make sure that disaster relief funds are fully funded to help Americans recover from Hurricane Idalia and is not linked with additional funding for Ukraine. Reporting from the White House, Iris Howe, NTD News.
Over at the Supreme Court, Justice Clarence Thomas explaining why his wealthy friend provided private flights for official business. This comes in his first financial disclosure report since the rule on reporting personal hospitality was changed. NTD's Arlene Richards has the details.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas recently released his financial disclosure report for 2022. His first report since the rules on reporting personal hospitality transportation changed. He says in the report that before March 2023, he didn't have to report personal hospitality. But on March 14, 2023, the Judicial Conference provided new guidance on the personal hospitality exemption to explicitly state for the first time that transportation that substitutes for commercial transportation will no longer be considered exempt from reporting under that provision. In an April 2023 report, nonprofit news outlet ProPublica reported that Thomas had taken numerous luxury trips paid for by billionaire Harlan Crow. Crow is a commercial real estate powerhouse known for his significant Republican donations. It accused Thomas of violating the rules on financial disclosure by failing to report the trips as gifts. The report triggered an investigation by Senate Democrats who successfully passed a bill on party lines to adopt a Supreme Court Code of Ethics.
The court should have a code of conduct with clear and enforceable rules, so both justices and the American people know when conduct crosses the line. The highest court in the land should not have the lowest ethical standards.
Thomas explained in the report that prior to March 14, 2023, the then existing rules didn't require disclosure of personal hospitality travel. The report shows that Crow provided or paid for travel for 3 trips in 2022. For example, Thomas reported that he flew in a private plane to a Dallas conference in May 2022. He explained this was due to security concerns after a report of the Supreme Court's draft opinion to overturn Roe v. Wade was released. Crow paid for or provided Thomas's private jet travel and meals, the disclosure says. Thomas listed all of the trips under reimbursements with no reportable gifts. Thomas isn't the only Supreme Court justice flying for free. A 2019 Open Secrets report reveals that several other Supreme Court justices took trips paid for by a third party, including retired Justice Stephen Breyer, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Sonia Sotomayor, and Chief Justice John Roberts. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The U.S. Capitol physician giving Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell the green light to continue with his schedule as usual. This is after he appeared to freeze up when taking reporters' questions yesterday. The attending physician, Dr. Brian Monahan, said in a statement, occasional lightheadedness is not uncommon in concussion recovery. He also mentioned dehydration. McConnell reportedly took steps to reassure his allies and donors he can do his job. The 81-year-old senator is the longest-serving congressional leader in United States history. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.